Could it really be happening? Could the Big 12 actually be adding UConn to the conference? Brett Yormark and his due diligence may actually pan out. He may actually get what he wants and may actually get the UConn Huskies as a member of the Big 12. What is going on out there, Couz's Corner family? Welcome to this live stream. Come on in, build yourself up to the bar. Let me pour you out another shot of top-shelf college football content on tap in this live show. We are talking about the news that came out. It's for those of you who watched my live show earlier in the week, not really news. At that point, we were just considering it a rumor. Now it's actually official. Big 12 is in talks with UConn about them potentially joining the conference. Thank you all for joining the show tonight. Those of you watching on X, thank you very much. Please come over and check out the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to it. Please check out the past videos I've done over there and past live streams. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Regardless of what platform you're watching on, please drop me a comment. I will address as many as I can. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know how this works. Drop me a super chat if you want me to highlight your comment, and I'll be sure to get to it. Thanks to Tyler Nelson, Crazy Speedy One, William Strong, Jackson Johnson, PA Mountaineer. Thanks for all being the first ones in the chat room tonight. Thanks for hopping on board the train, as I was going to say. This live stream. Wasn't expecting to do a live stream tonight, but I'm a Big 12 show. I'm a fan of a Big 12 team, and I think this is something I need to talk about. So we're going to do it. Congratulations to Mark Zanetto from Locked On UConn. He was on the Big 12 Locked On Big 12 show earlier this week, and he said he was hearing from sources that UConn would be announcing within 2 weeks they were going to the Big 12. I invited Mark to come on the show tonight. He was unavailable, but I want to make sure he gets the proper credit. He was the first one out of the gate with the story. A lot of people are trying to credit Drake at Locked On Big 12, and yes, it was Drake's show, so he does deserve some credit. But it was Mark Zanetto who actually broke the news. So thanks to Mark Zanetto for doing that. Congrats to him for having the scoop. A lot of people didn't believe it. I said myself, let's consider it a rumor until we hear it from people like the Brett McMurphys, the Pete Thamels of the world. And well, guess what? We did. New York Times was the first one out of the gate with it. Stuart Mandel, I believe it was, over there that came out with it tonight, earlier this evening. That article is behind a paywall, so I'm not going to share it with you. But what I will do, first, let me make sure I gave credit to the proper writer here. It's actually Andrew Marchand and Justin Williams who came out with it. My apologies. So hats off to Andrew Marchand and Justin Williams over at The Athletic, which is part of New York Times. They are the ones who wrote the story. But it is behind the paywall, so I'm not going to share the whole story with you. But I do have a couple interesting quotes from it that I'm going to share. But what I'm going to do is share the Brett McMurphy article. After Justin and Andrew came out with theirs, Ross Dellinger came out with an article. And, of course, Brett McMurphy came out with one as well, among others. But I'm going to share Brett's article with you because his isn't behind the paywall. It's public. So let's do it. It says, the Big 12 could be in the expansion market again. This time the league is considering adding UConn. Sources told Action Network UConn would not join the Big 12 in football until 2031. But the Huskies' back-to-back national champion men's basketball team and Olympic sports teams could join as early as 2026, sources said. Last week, UConn officials met in Dallas with Big 12 athletic directors. UConn showcased how it would build in the future leading up to 2031 and invest more in football, a source said. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, who has been enamored by UConn's basketball program and its Northeast media market, is expected to make a presentation to the Big 12's presidents who must approve any expansion additions. If UConn is added, it may not be the Big 12's last addition. Keep your eye on what happens in the ACC, a source said. I don't think that's a big secret. Depending on Florida State and Clemson and their efforts to leave the ACC, other ACC schools also could become available, some of which have natural rivalries with Big 12 programs, a source said. Mountaineers, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville. Anyway, since 2020, UConn has been a football independent but competes in the Big East in non-football sports. UConn would have to provide the Big East 27 months' notice to leave, but that could be negotiated along with the $15 million exit fee. UConn men's basketball coach Bobby Hurley is not against a move to the Big 12, a source said, and that shocked me. I would have thought as a basketball coach, obviously this is not coming from an article, I'm giving you my thoughts here. But I would have thought as a basketball coach, he would have wanted to stay playing teams, sort of within their geographic footprint. And I know all the teams in the Big East aren't from the Northeast. They have to travel out to Marquette and places like that. But it wouldn't be near the travel he's going to have to deal with in the Big 12. Anyway, let's keep going. The addition of UConn would cement the Big 12's. Oh, never mind. I missed a sentence. It says, UConn men's basketball coach Bobby Hurley is not against a move to the Big 12. He loves the Big East, but he understands the Big 12 provides more resources and more money, the source said. The addition of UConn would cement the Big 12 status as the nation's top basketball conference, joining heavyweights Kansas, Arizona, and Houston. Last year, Yormark said he was no longer involved with UConn or Gonzaga. We had conversations with UConn and Gonzaga, and unfortunately, things didn't work out, Yormark said last year, only because the dream scenario unfolded for us, adding the Four Corner schools. So those conversations are no longer. Yormark, though, had never wavered on his interest in UConn. Yormark's going to kick every tire possible, a Big 12 athletic director said. We're open to looking at anything. UConn is a big brand, the biggest branded institution in the Northeast. Sources said a key component to adding UConn is the 16 current Big 12 members would not see a reduction in revenue. And as someone who has been through conference realignment before, with the House settlement case and a fan of his team who's not that wealthy, that is important to me. Let's keep going. It says, with UConn potentially joining in 2031, it would coincide with the Big 12's next media rights deal. The Big 12's current media rights deal with Fox and ESPN expires after the 2030-2031 school year. Although UConn's football program hasn't had a winning season since 2010, the belief is that being part of the halo of the Big 12 would help build the Huskies' football success. The source brought up examples of the football programs at Arizona and Kansas, which struggled in past seasons but are coming off impressive 2023 seasons. Both the Wildcats and Jayhawks are expected to contend for the Big 12 football title this year. Just look at Arizona and Kansas a few years ago, the source said. There's a huge media value up there in the Northeast. That's why Yormark looks at it. The question is, will the Big 12 presidents pull the trigger? To me, if it's already gotten as far as the presidents, I would say this is probably going to happen because I would have imagined the ADs and the presidents have already had these discussions. And I don't think the presidents would sit in on this meeting if they weren't at least somewhat confident it was going to pass. That's just I could be completely wrong, but that's just my opinion. All right. So that's that article. Now I want to read a couple sentences from the original article put out by The Athletic. Again, I'm not going to share it because it's behind a paywall and that wouldn't be right. But here's what I want to read. It says, and this is regarding the money part of it and what ESPN and Fox would be interested in or not when it comes to this. But it says, ESPN has previously considered adding more money to the Big 12's television deal, according to broadcasting sources briefed on the talks. I'm going to read that again. ESPN has previously considered adding more money to the Big 12's television deal, according to broadcasting sources briefed on the talks. ESPN is located in Bristol, Connecticut, just 40 miles from Stores, which is where Connecticut is, UConn is. Fox, the Big 12's other broadcast rights partner, may be less inclined to add money as it already has UConn basketball as part of its Big East package. Current members have been told UConn's addition would be, quote, budget neutral and would not reduce conference revenue payouts to existing members, according to multiple Big 12 administrators. So it looks like ESPN is probably on board with this because they had previously considered, well, it says considered, it didn't say they committed, but it looks like ESPN would at least be open to adding money to the deal for UConn basketball. And obviously it's going to be financially advantageous to UConn or they wouldn't even be considering it, right? And they want to improve their football. They know the future's in football. They know that they have to bolster their football brand, so they need to get into a power league to do that. But the interesting piece to me here is Fox. Fox already has a Big East deal. Would they really want UConn to move to the Big 12? Now, we know Fox is the secondary rights holder to the Big 12 deal, and they did get more they did get more Big 12 basketball content with this latest deal, which doesn't start until 2025, actually. So maybe it would actually, but thinking out loud here, if I'm Fox, do I want UConn playing Arizona and Kansas in the same conference? Daggone right I do. Daggone right I do. So it wouldn't surprise me if Fox, it wouldn't surprise me if Fox is willing to step up and pay a little bit more money. Now, obviously, they're not going to get football money here. We're talking basketball money. Whether that's $10 million, $9 million, $8 million, whatever that number is, it would still be more than what they're making in the Big East, which I think is $4 million a year. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're making around $4 to $5 million a year in the Big East, but the Big East did just sign a new deal, and I'm pretty sure it was going to be for more money. So I'm anxious to see if this happens. I'll be anxious to see what the financials look like, because it's shocking to me that UConn actually wants to do this, to be honest with you. It has to be because they're wanting to bolster their football brand. But I'm kind of surprised, though, that they're not waiting around for the ACC to implode, because to me, UConn's wanted to be in the ACC for a while anyway. And they're a natural fit in the ACC because of where they're located. Natural rivals there with Syracuse, with Boston College, teams in their part of the country. So it would make sense for them to be in the ACC and be a team that the ACC could backfill with once Florida State and Clemson leave, because we know that's going to happen. But apparently UConn doesn't want to wait around. They don't want to take the chance on what may happen with the ACC. The Big 12 is knocking on their door now, so they're going to answer the door if it opens for them. Now, that actually segues into the next part of the live stream that I want to talk about, and that is the ACC's future. There was an article that came out about the ACC that I think might tell us something about their future that I haven't seen anybody do a show on yet, at least not in the last day or so. So I'm going to talk about it, and these kind of can tie in together. But before I do that, I've got to take care of some housekeeping here, and I need to give a shout out to my channel sponsor, because I have not done that yet. I got to give a shout out to Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, and then I will get to that super chat I'll see there. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice, and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident, or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians, because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. All right, so thanks to Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, your personal injury and medical malpractice attorneys in West Virginia and Virginia. They are licensed in Virginia as well. So, and got to thank them for helping us keep the lights on here. And speaking of keeping the lights on, I've got an awesome, generous super chat here I need to get to. Mr. Appalachia Africa Twin, man, thank you. You continue to come through with big donations. I'm going to call you a super donor, because that's what you are, super VIP here. Try this bottle, Couz, Isaac Bowman Small Batch Port Barrel Finish. Oakville Road Liquor Store, $55 a bottle. Man, you are just a bourbon connoisseur, my brother. Bourbon connoisseur. I love it. You're making me want to try more bourbon, man. And I've never been a huge bourbon guy, but I'm going to have to try these bourbons. I did try the Angel's Envy not long ago, and it was good. Next, but I've still got to get my hands on some Four Roses, and I've still got to get my hands on this, the Isaac, the Small Batch Port Barrel Finish. So thank you for the awesome donation. You know, I've never tried Scotch. I've got a friend of mine who likes it. I've never tried it personally. Obviously, I'm willing to try anything once, so I'd love, maybe one of these days I'll try it. But I don't want to buy a whole bottle of it and then not like it. At least with bourbon, if I don't like a bourbon that well, I can mix. You can mix it with something, right? And it helps. And I'll drink it anyway. But heck, if all else fails, I'll use it to smoke something in my smoker. But with Scotch, I'm kind of afraid to buy a whole bottle because I may not like it. But I may have to try it. I might try me some at some point. Cam Harrison, it is, man. It's week 0 tomorrow. I'm so excited about this season. I'm ready to talk about football and actually what happens on the field. I really am. Yes, PA Mountaineer, Gee will get a vote on this for sure. He will get a vote. If I had to guess, West Virginia, this is a complete guess now, by the way, complete guess. But I would say West Virginia is probably on board with this because it gives them another East Coast opponent. It would be the second closest to them besides Cincinnati. It's still 500 miles away, but at least it's closer than 700 or 1,000. Yes, I am ready. Elite Scuba Adventures. I cannot wait. Cannot wait. He says, Couz, are you ready for next week's game? That's Elite Scuba and Adventures. Cannot wait. And by the way, I want to give a shout out. And I almost forgot to do this. And I was going to play the clip, but I forgot to look for it before the show. And I don't want to bore you guys while I sit and look for a clip. But for those of you who are West Virginia fans, two things. First of all, got to give a shout out to Tony Caridi. This week's episode of Three Guys Before the Game. It's a for those of you who aren't West Virginia fans, it's a podcast. Tony Caridi is the voice of West Virginia football, the current voice of the West Virginia football and basketball, play-by-play guy. He has a podcast with two other West Virginia personalities, Brad Howe, Hoppy Kercheval. Very good show. One of my favorite. I will during the season, I listen to pretty much every episode. During the off season, not as much. But anyway, Tony came out on the show Tuesday and said the conversations of. He basically said what was in his article. He said the conversation between UConn and the Big 12 have reared their head again, so be on the lookout for that, for news on that. And he basically said, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Tony does not want him to do it. He doesn't think it's a good idea. But he's not the one voting. I've had mixed feelings on it. I just, I lived through the Big East days where the Big East collapsed because you had basketball schools mixed with football schools, and it just didn't work, right? They couldn't come to agreements on TV deals. But the way this is being done and the way they're looking to grandfather in football, it's not the same thing, in my opinion. Yes, they would be coming in basketball and other sports for now, but they would eventually be looking to bring their football in if they show they can invest in it. Now, my question would be, and this is why I wanted to bring Mark Zanetto on the show, my question would be this. What happens if they don't invest properly in football, or at least the Big 12 presidents don't think they did, and they don't get in football in 2031? Do they stay in basketball, or do they get kicked out? That'll be the question. PA Mountaineer, they weren't really rivals in the Big East, but they did play, and there were some really good games. UConn actually did well. They actually won the Big East one year in football and went to a BCS bowl game. Now they got beaten pretty badly by Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, but they did make a BCS bowl game, and they won the Big East Conference. So they actually, Randy Edsall was their coach. They had some really good football teams. The year that West Virginia, in 2007, the year that West Virginia came that close to playing for the national title, UConn was a ranked team. West Virginia spanked them 66 or something. The game right before the Pitt game, they were ranked. UConn was a highly ranked team. They had one of the top defenses in the country that year. So UConn has had some success in football. They have Jim Moore Jr. there now as their coach, so he has NFL experience. They have assistants on their coach that are experienced coaches, assistants on their staff, that are experienced coaches. So UConn, to me, with the right type of investment, can be good at football again. I've said this multiple times. And I would rather have UConn over some other schools. I would rather have UConn than Boston College. I'd rather have UConn than Wake Forest. Definitely UConn over any G5 school, to be honest with you, or any other G5 school, however you want to word that. But, I would obviously rather have Virginia Tech, Pitt, NC State, those types of schools, Louisville. Obviously, Florida State, Clemson, but I don't think that's happening. But the way they're doing it, by saying, okay, basketball only for now, you get a partial share, show us you invest in football, and then 2031, we'll look at bringing you in. And by the way, it will also, Brett Yormark's goal is to separate the basketball TV deal and the football TV deal and have two separate deals. This would make that basketball deal, it would be through the roof, I would think, compared to the other conferences. If you have UConn, Arizona, Houston, Kansas, throw Baylor in there now, maybe West Virginia will be good again by that point. Maybe if Iowa State can stay good, Texas Tech, who's been good, you have all those schools in the same basketball conference. How can you not give it more money? And by the way, the Big 12 is now going to 20 conference games in basketball. So, again, there's going to be more inventory for the networks. This would add one more team to add to that inventory. And let's not forget, what if they also reinvigorate the conversations with Gonzaga? What if they go talk to Gonzaga out west and try to bring them in the fold too? Now, I'm not necessarily for doing that. I'm not for doing that at all, because I don't think we need a basketball only school that far out. And I just don't think it would work. But I'm just puzzled by how this helps you. I know the money is going to be more for UConn, but is it really that much more? I don't know. When you factor in all the travel and all that, I don't know. PA Mountaineer, he says, at Louisville, UConn, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, VT, you could have a West and East pod. Absolutely. All right, now the ACC stuff. Very interesting article. I was not planning to do a show about this, but then when I decided to go live tonight, I thought, well, this would be a great topic for a live show. So WRAL, it's a station. I think it's in North Carolina. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but they've put a lot of good stuff out over the last few months about the ACC stuff and the lawsuits and what's going on at UNC and all this other stuff. But they sit down and did an interview with one of the executives at ESPN who oversees the ACC Network, and some very interesting things came out of this interview. I'm just going to go ahead and pull it up, and I'm not going to go through the entire article because it's kind of long, and I don't want to bore you all to death. I want to get to some of your comments here in a minute. But this article was by Brian Murphy, by the way. It says ACC Network turning 5 or 5-year anniversary delivers revenue exposure boost for league. All right. It says 5 years after its long-awaited launch, the ACC Network has delivered on its biggest promises: more revenue for the league schools, more exposure for the school's athletics programs, and more availability of those programs' games across the nation. But the network, which celebrates its 5th anniversary with special programming Thursday and the underlying agreements attached to it, haven't been able to provide the league with something it's craved for more than a decade: stability. It was launched in August 22 of 2019, right before the pandemic hit. NC State AD Boo Corrigan at the time said there's the idea of having a network is a really big deal. There's 3 conferences that have one, and we're awful proud that we do. It says the most obvious measure of the network's success is what it contributes to the league's bottom line. The year before the ACC Network launched, the ACC made $288.6 million from its television rights, according to the league's federal tax forms. In the 22-23 year, the last year for which data is available, the league made $481.7 million, an increase of nearly 67% from the final pre-network year. ESPN owed the league $270.3 million in television rights base payments for the 22-23 year, according to a legal filing by the Florida State University Board of Trustees. And here's what ESPN's senior director, the one I mentioned, his name is Jeremy Michaels. Here's what he had to say about the ACC Network. He says, quote, "It's an unequivocal success. From a revenue and a sales standpoint, I would say it's exceeded our expectations. I would say it is extraordinarily successful." Now, does that sound like ESPN wants to get out of the ACC deal to you? If they're making that kind of money on this network, why in the world would they want to get out of it? Let's keep going. The ACC generated a league record $706.6 million in 22-23, third among conferences, a figure that is expected to continue to rise. ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips touted the ACC's position relative to other leagues, saying the ACC expects to remain third in the years to come, behind the SEC and Big Ten in total revenue and per school payout. Now, Sam Bradshaw over at Sikkim 365 put out a great article today. I recommend you go check it out. I'm not sure he agrees with this. He actually thinks in his estimates, and they're estimates, but in his estimates, he sees the Big 12 eventually catching and or even passing the ACC right around the 2030, 2031 mark, assuming the Big 12's deal, or it may have been further out than that. But anyway, eventually he sees the Big 12 surpassing the ACC. But let's keep going. The league saw a significant jump in 22 when the network got carriage on Comcast in late 21. The SEC network will play a big part in any future increases. The base rate, as outlined in the Florida State complaint, increases by 4.5% annually. Now, this is key right here. For all those people who said the ACC was not on board adding the 3 new schools at Cal, Stanford, and SMU, listen to this. Michael said the ACC network will receive in-market carriage rates from cable and satellite companies in Northern California and Dallas, 2 of the 10 largest markets in the nation, after adding California, Stanford, and SMU over the summer in a divided expansion vote. The network receives money from each subscriber, but those subscribers counted as in-market pay considerably more than those deemed out-of-market, said the Sports Business Journal in 2019. The ACC Network would be close to the SEC Network's fees, which were around $1.30 per month for in-market subs and around 25 cents per month for out-of-market subs. And there are millions. They're like, I think I read in Sam Bradshaw's article, there's like 5.6 million homes the ACC Network is going to be able to get that carriage fee in. Something like that. $1.30 minus 25 cents is what? $1.05 times 5 million or whatever the number is. The ACC Network doesn't get official ratings. Let me go on past that. All right, here it is. There's another quote. It says, "One of the things that I'm focused on every single day is growing viewership," Michael said. "They've been double-digit percentage growth year over year over year. I'm very proud of that fact. I think that's only going to grow with the new territories that we're in, with the new fan bases that are coming into the league." Let me see if there's anything else of note here. Okay, here's where it talks about Florida State. "There are 3 things that FSU is keenly interested in," Florida State President Eric Barron told the Orlando Sentinel in 2013. "One is stability. The second is that we have revenues that are competitive. And the third is to have what will be an ACC network that helps further our brand and resources." That's not what I thought it was. Anyway, bottom line is this. Does that sound like somebody at ESPN that wants the ACC network to go away? ESPN is making, and ESPN gets half of that revenue. That additional revenue they're going to make from those carriage fees in California and Dallas, ESPN gets half of that money. It's a crap load of money. Why would they walk away from that? Yes, I understand if Florida State and Clemson leave, it will decrease the value. And I'm not saying that the AC or the ESPN won't renegotiate the deal and lower what they pay the ACC. But I just don't see them, unless that conference completely implodes and they lose like half the league, I don't see them giving it up. I just don't see it. You're still going to have, especially if they're able to keep Cal, Stanford, SMU, those big markets, if they're able to keep, maybe they bring USF in, get some more Florida fans in that, to help offset some of the ones they lose with Florida State. I know it's not going to be an equal trade there, but you see what I'm saying. They could backfill with teams in other markets. And that leads back to the UCONN thing. You can bet your bottom dollar that UCONN would be at the top of that list to backfill. But if they're already in the Big 12, they can't backfill. So Brett Yormark, I think Brett Yormark is playing hardball here. And Brett Yormark is being a cutthroat businessman, which, hey, everybody wants to talk about how this is a business now, right? Then they don't need to have an issue with Brett Yormark, who comes in and tries these aggressive moves. He has admitted he is a disruptor, but in a good way. That's what he's doing. If he gets UConn, it takes them off the table for the ACC. That's one less team they have to backfill with. They'd have to go to team 2 or 3 on their list or whatever. You get my point. Not saying UConn will be the number one choice, but I'm sure they would be near the top. They won't be able to get that school if UConn's in the Big 12. And guess what else? If Duke needs a home, you don't think they'd want to go over to the Big 12 and play basketball with UConn and Arizona and Kansas? I think this is all part of Brett Yormark's long-term strategy, folks. I really do. Now, again, I'm still not 100% convinced this is the right move for the Big 12, but I'm also not convinced that it's not. I find myself in the middle on this, trying to figure out which way where I stand, because I just don't know. I really don't. Justin Cook in the house. What's up, Justin? He says, "Go ACC." He's an ACC guy. Very good account to follow on X. UT Parking says the ACC is doomed. Florida State didn't sue the ACC just to reconcile later on. Florida State will leave the ACC come hell or high. Yeah, Florida State and Clemson are out, I think, eventually. I'm not sure that's even debatable. They want out. Unless the ACC is able to pull off a miracle or they lose in the courts, they're going to leave. But that doesn't mean the ACC cannot survive. It just may be less valuable, you know. I did a video months ago. Jim Williams, former ESPN producer, put out on X one time. He sees the ACC eventually becoming like somewhat like of a power conference Ivy League. Like they're going to have a bunch of really good private academic schools in the conference, like USF. I don't know if USF's private, but they are a really high academic school, like the USF, Tulane, those types of schools. You know, UCONN would improve the academic standing of the Big 12. That's another piece to this too. Think about that. I know a lot of people don't like to talk about academics and realignment, but guys, folks, we've got to be real here. We can't be naive to the fact that school presidents like being partnered with they like being partnered up with schools that increase their academic prestige. That's just the way it is. Whether we as fans like it or not, we might look at it as pretentious or we might look at it as egotistical. Like I like to say, they drink their tea with their thumbs out, whatever. But at the end of the day, it matters to university presidents. And as long as it matters to university presidents, it's going to matter because they're the ones that make the vote, that vote yes or no to these expansions. So Arizona State, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, adding all those schools not only helped strengthen the conference from athletically, they also helped strengthen it academically. It gave them good markets. And I haven't done a study on this, but I would venture to guess if you went into New York City, there were probably more UConn fans. There are probably a lot of UConn fans in New York City in that market. We all know it's a big basketball market. Probably that's one city in America that's probably more passionate about basketball than they are football, is New York City. They love their basketball up there. Brett Yormark wants to be there. And keep in mind, he used to work in Brooklyn. He knows that area. And he probably understands that getting UConn in the league would help get them into New York because of the fan bases that would be in New York. That would be huge for the conference. They could play games at Madison Square Garden. I think that's big. That's a big deal. You might get, could they be, and this is, I'm totally brainstorming here. I'm just rambling, but could they be looking at building a Big 12 network at some point? But in order to do that, you've got to have the right kind of markets. You've got Arizona State and Arizona, where you get the Phoenix market now. Arizona State also happens to have the largest enrollment in the country, right? So you get all those living alumni that could subscribe to the Big 12 network. You have UCF in the league now, second largest enrollment in the country. You get all those living alumni who would subscribe to the Big 12 network. You have the West Virginia fan. Yeah, West Virginia's not a big state, but West Virginia is one of the largest fan bases in the conference. When you look nationwide, almost all West Virginia fans, I would almost guarantee, would be willing to pay for the Big 12 network. I know I would, if it means we get to see more content about our Mountaineers. Just those are just three examples. UConn will bring that. You could potentially get, if you're looking at building a network, you could potentially get the Big 12 network into New York with UConn, and not to mention Boston, and the Connecticut market is not terrible either. That Northeast market there's a lot of people up there. So look, like I said, I'm just brainstorming here, thinking of. I'm trying to think like a business person thinks. 10, 20 years down the road. Brett Yormark's not just looking at today. He's looking at the future of the Big 12. He's a forward-thinking guy. He's a business guy. That's in business. My president of our company's always telling us, we're not looking backwards. We're looking forwards. We're putting together 5 and 10 and 20-year plans here. I don't want to know what you did yesterday. I want to know what you're going to do 5 years from now. That's how companies think. That's how Brett Yormark's going to think. That's how businesses think. Nate answered a question for me here. Nate Simon's an Iowa State fan in the house. He says, UConn brings over 11 million households with a TV. That's a lot of households, man. I like it. WVU Earl, who's a VIP member here on the channel, says the Big 12 network would be great. I agree with you, Earl. By the way, you see that badge beside Earl's name? That means he's a VIP. If you want to be a VIP, hit the join button below or go to my channel homepage. You'll see my good-looking mug there. Right beside it is a join button. You can do that too, and you'll get perks. Also, I forgot to do this earlier. If you're a West Virginia fan, I want to give a shout-out to the guys over at WV Sports Now. They partnered with me here several months ago. And if you sign up for the Holler, which is their behind the scenes and their ad-free content, if you sign up for that, a 1-year membership, and you use promo code Couz, C-O-U-Z at checkout, you get a 1-year membership, which is a $34.99 value for $20.99. It's a 40% discount on a 1-year membership to the Holler over at WV Sports Now with promo code Couz. If you're a West Virginia fan, heck, even if you're a Big 12 fan, it might be something you want to check out. All right. Let me see what other comments we got here. Got to put the super chat back up in the meantime. All right. We've got Kevin Hampton says Utah was a huge ad for the Big 12. ASU brings nothing to the table. I mean, I got sidetracked. Utah, and with Utah and BYU, you get the whole state of Utah. You get the Salt Lake City market. That's another good market to be in. We already have the Dallas-Fort Worth market with TCU. Got several markets in there in and around Texas. Now, obviously, Texas is the big brand there. I get it, but hey, you got to take what you can get, right? You got the state of Kansas. You get some of the Kansas City market, if not all of it. I'm sure Missouri carries part of that too. But you get the Cincinnati market, the Orlando market. You got some good markets in the Big 12. Houston, another gigantic market. Again, I know they're a pro sports town, but they don't have to be a passionate fan to pay the carriage fees for the network. You know what I mean? So, as a matter, and I'm not exactly sure how it all works, but you might, if you upgraded the sports package for me, for my cable provider, I upgraded the sports package so that I can get ESPNU and all that, so I don't miss any Mountaineer games. That's my understanding that the conference networks are part of that package. In ACC cities, that package may cost more money. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it works or not, or if you can buy the conference network by itself. Somebody please explain that to me if you're familiar with how all that works. Big Ears Bo answered another question I had. He says the Big East just signed a new contract, $8 million a year for UConn basketball. That means they have to be making more than that in the Big 12. So let's do some quick math here. I don't have my phone with me; it's charging, but $31.7 million a year, you got to figure at least 80% of that, or 75% of it at least, is football. Right? So what is that? 25? See, 20 million would be 2/3. It's more than that. So you figure 23 to 24, maybe even 25 million of that 30 is football related. So how somebody make it make sense as to how UConn is benefiting by this. Only way it makes sense to me is if they get a portion. And even if I don't think the league would be willing to give up a portion of their. I don't think the league would be willing to give up a portion of their college football playoff money to UConn. Maybe there's a scheduling agreement built in somewhere where they make, benefit from playing Big 12 games, football teams, kind of like Notre Dame does with the ACC. There's got to be something there, but otherwise, I just don't see how it makes sense. I really don't. But again, I'm sure if it happens, I'm sure the numbers will come out. Infamous front runner says if UConn is in play, then in my opinion, the number is 24 teams. Maybe Gonzaga, Justin. I hope that's not the case. I don't want any I don't want any basketball only schools in the conference. If they don't have a football team and there's not a chance to add them in the future, with UConn, I don't want them. I just don't think it's valuable enough. Sort of PA Mountaineer. It's called Big 12 Plus on ESPN. I guess it's kind of like a network. So maybe this, and that's a great point, actually. That's a great point. That is kind of their version of a network. And this would allow them to add value to that for ESPN. If you get UConn basketball games, and remember, ESPN Plus shows just more. They show, they show more than just games on there for the Big 12. So if they can get UConn content, as passionate as UConn's women and men's basketball teams are, and another thing, ESPN, remember that deal they just signed where they're getting all this extra content for other sports as well, including women's sports? It would increase the value of that deal. So the more I think about this, the more I see it making sense for ESPN and for the Big 12. I just don't know how it's making sense for UConn yet. I'm trying to wrap my brain around that one. UT Parking says DFW, Phoenix, Salt Lake, Houston, Orlando, Cincinnati, Kansas City. Amazing. Yeah, some good markets. West Virginia gets Pittsburgh market's not huge, but it's decent. West Virginia brings in a portion of that market. West Virginia brings you it's not, you're not going to find it listed on the DMA or the Nielsen ratings or whatever they call it, but West Virginia does bring in a pretty large portion of the D.C. market as well. There's a lot of West Virginia fans in the D.C. area. So, yeah, I mean, that has to factor in too. But yeah, as far as immediate markets, some big markets there for sure. Kevin Hampton says some of the markets aren't getting good TV numbers, and that's fair, Kevin. That is definitely a fair statement. UT Parking says men's basketball is growing so fast, especially with the gambling industry skyrocketing. It's low-hanging fruit. The Big 12 needs to put resources into men's basketball, be unique. And I think that's what Brett Yormark's trying to do. But the problem is they can't just totally ignore football because football still drives the bus. And they have to invest in football to be valuable enough to bring in the future. At least that's the way I'm looking at it. Nate Simon says if M. Hover 3 can be believed, he posted on X back in July that Warner Discovery would be a serious bidder if Big 12 decoupled basketball media rights in 2031. This would be where the money. Yeah, and I actually think that's a great. I've talked about that on my show too. It wouldn't surprise me a bit to see Warner Brothers Discovery get into the game here, especially now that they've lost the NBA. They're going to want to get back into live sports content. And I was able to confirm with someone in the industry that it is possible that if the Big 12 wants to expand and ESPN and or Fox doesn't want to pay the freight, they could go to a third party and get money for the addition. So whether it be a streamer, whether it be somebody like TNT, so that's another angle to this too. Maybe they could get a third party involved. Obviously, ESPN and Fox would always get first dibs on games because they're the primary rights holders here. But they could bring in a third party who could get some games as well and add a little bit more money to the pot to add a team like a UConn maybe or somebody else for that matter. Shannon Miller, a channel member here, says, Couz, the money has to be right. Why not take them all? UConn, the ACC teams, the Pac-2, more teams, smaller piece of the pie. How does it work? No, you're right, Shannon, and that's why it was critical to I don't know if you were here early in the show, but in the article I read, it was critical to the presidents that it did not dilute the revenue for them individually as schools. They wanted to make sure that it was at worst, revenue neutral. And apparently that's what this is going to be, is a revenue neutral deal to where it's not going to add any money to the pot for anybody in the league, but it's also not going to take any away either. The Big 12 presidents are not going to agree to this, I don't think, if it's going to cost them money, especially with that House settlement coming down the pipeline where they're going to have to dole out $20 million a year in revenue sharing. They can't afford it. I mean, what West Virginia's athletic budget is $105 million. $20 million of that's already going to pay their athletes. They can't afford to lose money. No way, shape, or form. And the other Big 12 schools are in the same boat. So great point, and I think that's fair. That's why I've been kind of skeptical on it. But if Brett Yormark can guarantee that it's not costing anybody money, then I'm willing to accept it. Yep, great point, Nate. Do you think that Yormark is trying to build a monster hoops conference with the idea that it might counter the effects of a football super conference? Maybe, Kevin. And I think I've talked about this before too. if you have all the best basketball brands who are dominating in March, or at least, a large chunk of them are, and you have majority of your league getting into the NCAA tournament, and you have the best basketball conference in the country, they're not going to leave you. They're not going to leave you out of the conversations when it comes to forming these conferences, because there's too much. Now, I understand the NCAA money is nowhere near the football, but I think it's enough to where you at least have to keep a seat at the table, if that makes sense. Now, if they end up taking football and making its own separate deal away from the NCAA, then maybe we have a different discussion. But if you do that, but even still, though, Kevin, if they do that, they're probably going to want to also do their own basketball tournament too at some point, right? Outside the NCAA, the power conferences could do their own thing, and if the Big 12 has the most valuable brands in basketball, then again they'll keep their seat at the table. You cannot leave them out of the discussion, in my opinion. If they've got Kansas, Arizona, UConn, Houston, Baylor, all these schools, I think West Virginia is going to get back to winning again, at least within a couple of seasons. I think Darren DeVries was a home run hire there. I think he'll have them winning games again. Iowa State's been good. BYU had a good run last year. I mean, the other Hurley brother, Arizona State. I mean, they haven't been that great, but they're, again, it's a decent basketball brand. You cannot leave those schools out. Yes, Mr. Monkey says we don't get carriage fees for ESPN Plus based on markets because it's streaming. Exactly. The Big 12 made about $46 million per team with a projected $50 million next year. If ESPN pays per rata for UConn, that's about $20 million. I was looking strictly at the just the flat TV rights. It was $31.7 million. I wasn't counting college football playoff money or any of the other stuff that makes up that 46. I was looking strictly at the TV money. But yeah, I'm sure my numbers are off. But it's got to make sense. Say UConn basketball is worth $10 million a year. How is that beneficial for the 16 other members? It's all about the future. It's all about the future, Big Ears Bo. I think you're securing yourself, and like I said earlier, it could be a defensive move. If you take UConn, the ACC can't take them later, which means if they lose teams, they can't. That's one less team they have to backfill with. And oh, by the way, it may also make a team like Duke look at your conference a little harder when the ACC starts to crumble, if it does. Now, I don't think like I said earlier, I don't think the ACC is going to crumble personally. I'm confident Florida State and Clemson will leave, and I'm confident one or two more teams will probably leave. But I don't think it's going to completely crumble. But I do think the Big 12 could potentially grab a couple teams from the ACC. I do think that. Appalachia Africa Twin, another great point. He says WVU has a huge following in Charlotte, North Carolina. Couz, not a huge city, but a lot of alumni. Yes, absolutely. I didn't even bring them up, but that's a great one. I was at the bowl game last year in Charlotte, in the state of North Carolina, playing the Tar Heels, and that place was mostly West Virginia fans. So that was impressive. J Baller 54 says, big thing too is that bringing in UConn will not cut into existing members' piece of the pie. There will be things expected of UConn in their football, upgrade their stadium and other. Yes. And if they can upgrade, if they agree to these things and they're able to upgrade their football and make it valuable enough to bring in the conference, then that means it can increase the TV deal in 2031 and beyond. So again, it's a long outlook here. It's a forward-thinking look where you're looking at this TV deal's done. The TV deal that starts in 2025 is done. It's behind them. Everything they're doing now is looking ahead at the next TV deal. Now, Brett Yormark even said that in interviews. He said, right now we're focusing on making this conference more valuable so when the next round of TV negotiations come up, we're in a better position. That's everything they're doing today is getting ready for that 2031, which they'll probably start negotiations in 2029 or 2030. So they're preparing themselves for that 5 years down the road when they start having those TV negotiations. By the way, before I forget, I want to give another shout out to my channel sponsor here on this show. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner accident and injury law, located in West Virginia. If you are looking for an accident or injury attorney, call 304-999-HURT or go to yourlawyeryourvoice.com. That's a great point, Mr. Monkey says. Keep in mind that the 80-20 assumed split is per school average. Some basketball brands are worth more than 31.7 times 2 and some less. Yeah, and UConn will be worth a lot more. I think I looked at the numbers the other day, and if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think they brought in $14 million in revenue alone just in basketball. That's a lot just for basketball. They bring a lot more in basketball than they do football. Shannon says, sorry, Couz, I wasn't here earlier. I mean, the renegotiate with Hell TV contracts would have to be massive. Football and basketball based on. Yes, they would. And Brett Yormark has been saying for ever since he got the job that he thinks college basketball is undervalued with the networks. And he thinks the reason is because they've been combining the basketball and football all into one deal. He wants to decouple them, have two separate media deals, and he thinks by doing that, you'll get more money for basketball. So you make your basketball as valuable as possible to get more money on that deal while also trying to strengthen your football and getting more money on that deal at the same time. You strengthen your football by bringing in the four corner schools. You strengthen your basketball. Arizona did both. Arizona probably more basketball than football, but you get my point. By bringing in Utah, you strengthen your football. No doubt about it. By bringing in Air State, you got a much bigger market, another big market. By bringing in Colorado, you got the Denver market. I didn't even mention that one earlier. You bring in the Denver market. You bring in another solid football brand. By bringing in UConn, you get a solid basketball brand, and you increase the value of this part of this side. Look at it as two different entities. Look at it as two different companies. Say the Big 12 would be the parent company. Basketball is one company. Football is one company. Each company spins off, does their own deal. Each is responsible for their own revenue. You want each one to make as much money as possible. That's kind of how I frame it up in my head. Corey Belt says, Yormark is a mover and shaker, risk taker. Nobody could accuse him of just sitting around and collecting a paycheck. Absolutely. Now, will all these moves pay off? We won't know. It's going to be a few years down the road before we know if the stuff Brett Yormark is doing is going to work. But I'm telling you, doing nothing wasn't an option. The Big 12 was dying on the vine. And heck, they still could die. Who knows? The story will be written, right? But he's doing everything he can in his power to make sure it don't happen, and you can't fault the guy for that. I actually love it. Even though I may not agree with everything he does, I love the fact that he's out here moving and shaking, as you said, trying to get things done and thinking outside the box. Is that the one about the UConn deal, Nate? If it is, I actually read it on here live on the show when I first started. I don't think you were here yet. But if you go back and watch the replay later, you'll see that, assuming that's the one you're talking about. Ross Dellinger stated serious discussions, league officials having meeting next week. Yormark wants that New York market, Northeast market. Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even read Ross's article. Like I said, there's been several articles written about it today. Obviously can't read them all, so I just chose Brett's because I thought it kind of gave the 30,000-foot view of the whole thing, which is what I was shooting for. 2031 UConn football will be dilutive to the other 16 schools. We don't know that, Bo. We don't know that. And even if they are slightly dilutive, they can boost the basketball enough to offset it potentially. Brett Yormark, look, here's the way I look at it. Brett Yormark's a heck of a lot smarter than I am. He's a heck of a lot smarter when it comes to business, and he's definitely a heck of a lot smarter when it comes to how markets and TV and all that work, because he's done it. Look at what he did for NASCAR. I mean, he made NASCAR record amounts of money when he was overseeing that sport. So if he can take that same, and I know it's not NASCAR, but my gosh, it's still a business. It's still trying to make money and maximize revenue. That's what he's good at. And if I'm the Big 12 president, I'm not saying I sign off on everything, but you let him cook and you listen to what he has to say and you give him a chance. You hear him out, because I think the guy I think the guy's leading them in the right direction. I really do. Yep, Charlotte market's good. KC market's good, Mr. Monkey says. Shannon Miller, you're right. He says, we are blessed to have your mark. Pray the NBA doesn't call him. Hey, you're absolutely right, Shannon. The look-in clause is actually for the college football playoff, infamous front runner. After the 2027 season, they're going to do a look-in to see if they need to revise the format or the payout structure, any of that stuff. Is my understanding. I don't think there's a look-in. Now, there could be a look-in that I'm not aware of or just forgotten about, front runner. That's a great point. Maybe they have a look-in clause in their contract just like ESPN or just like the ACC does. And they probably, if they do, they probably don't want to make that public. Infamous front runner says, in my opinion, ESPN and Fox are making a P3 by making the Big 12 stronger with UConn and ACC football teams. Potentially. Yep, Nate. He says UConn would not join the football until 2031. Basketball, Olympic sports. Yep. And that's why that's the only, I had been pretty much against this, but when I saw that piece of it, Nate, I could get on board with that because they're not automatically just jumping right into the fire, taking a football program that's really not producing much or hasn't produced much in the past decade. Actually more than a decade. I like that idea, but yet you get that valuable basketball brand in your league. And by UConn being attached, I think they call it being in the Big 12 halo, by UConn being attached to the Big 12, it automatically increases their value. So, and then comes and if they invest money into football, improve their facilities, improve their infrastructure, both physically and financially, then maybe by 2031, they're ready to compete. And they do bring value as a football brand, or at least don't dilute the value. If they're just, even if they're just equal from a football brand perspective to the rest of the schools, the value they give you on basketball would be worth it alone. But here's what I fear. Here's a fear of mine. I worry that remember when UConn was in the American Athletic Conference, their basketball program went down the toilet for a few years. They went to the Big East. It's back up again. Heck, they won 2 straight national titles. I fear that by joining the Big 12 in basketball, it's actually going to hurt their basketball brand, make them less valuable, thus making this move less valuable. That's what I worry about. So it almost looks to me, I'll be honest with you, it almost looks to me like UConn as a school and as an athletic department is putting all their eggs into football. They're saying, okay, we're already great at basketball, but we have to improve at football or we're going to be stuck and left behind. And in order to do that, we have to be attached to a power conference. So even if it hurts our basketball, we've got to make a move to improve in football, and this is how we do it. That to me is almost what UConn's doing here. Is that the right move? I don't know, but it looks to me like that's what they're doing. ASU brings a huge market, and the university has never invested money in football. The new AD says not football will be the primary investment, with men's basketball being number 2. Thank you, Antoine Couz. I appreciate that, my man. Oh, he's talking about Arizona State. Yep, they do bring a huge market. Phoenix. Yeah, the new AD hopefully will change that, right? Apparently, there's now some pushback against the UConn story. One is that Big East just announced new media deal. Kevin, where'd you see that at? I would, if you could send me that. I don't have my phone on me for you to send me a DM, but I'd love for you to. I would imagine if UConn has 11 million viewers for basketball and huge alumni base, they can prop their football program to help their school. Appalachia Africa Twin says, set FSU and Clemson aside. If Big 12 could add UConn and Duke, that gives you the 11 plus million homes in the Northeast. But the Raleigh-Durham, Charlotte market in North Carolina, which is decent size between the two. Great point. Great point. That's a fast-growing market. Charlotte, North Carolina. Actually, I'm sorry. Raleigh, North Carolina is one of the fastest-growing cities in America right now, as is Charlotte. I know that the SEC and Big Ten are trying their damnedest to get in those markets. If I'm Brett Yormark, I'm trying to beat them to it. Some way, somehow, I'm trying to beat them to it. And maybe he is. I don't know. Now let's talk about the laughable idea of Gonzaga. You can make a decent arguments about UConn, but there's really I don't want Gonzaga big ears, Bo. I really don't. I don't think bringing in Gonzaga is a good idea at all. If a school can at least bring you football at some point down the road, I don't think it should even be considered. That's just my opinion. I have nothing against Gonzaga. They're a heck of a brand. Heck, they're 5-0 against West Virginia in recent years in basketball. They've owned West Virginia. So they're a great brand. But, man, they're out there kind of in the middle of nowhere. They bring no football team with them. I just don't understand how that would make any sense. I know they're not that far away from Utah. I get that. But they don't have football. I mean, that's at the end of the day, they can't bring you that down the road. I don't think the Big 12 presidents would ever agree to add UConn, to be honest. Just my opinion. All right. I want to try to find this Pete Thamel article that everybody's telling me about here. So bear with me a second. Oops. Well, there's pushback on this. Here's Mark D'Amelio. Founder of D'Amelio Huskies NIL Collective. Guys, this is big. Here's a guy who's over an NIL Collective. Let me share this. I just happen to see this. Mark D'Amelio, founder of D'Amelio Huskies NIL Collective. He says, let me scroll down here. He says, everyone talks about the roads in Stores Connecticut. Football is different than basketball. Although there's more people attending football games, fans will come to campus early and stay late. I don't care if I sit in traffic for 3 hours to see a game in Stores. All right, here it is. Read this right here. Let me minimize this. I love the Big East, and it has been great for UConn. I will miss the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden, but we must protect our future. Let's go Big 12. Can we build a football stadium on campus by 2031? LFG. I think that's huge right there because of who this person is. This is someone who is over an NIL collective for UConn. He's basically a booster. Football stadium on campus. Let's get to work. I mean, that to me, that was pretty big right there. Now let me see if I can find the or here we go. Amanda Kristovich says, another issue I'm not seeing a ton of conversation about. The Big East just announced a new media deal, including UConn. Methinks the conference and media contract may have something to say about UConn basketball leaving before that contract is up. And that was in a retweet of Pete Thamel's saying there's a far distance between conversations and anything that would happen. Story on UConn and the Big 12 with ESPN sources saying there's a ways to go. And AD skepticism to overcome before UConn could be added. All right, this is interesting. I'm glad somebody put me onto this. Let's see what this says here. This is fun. This is live TV here. I got all these tabs up. Here we go. Can you guys see that? How big? No, it's kind of small on the screen, isn't it? Let me see if I can make it bigger. All right, here we go. The Big 12 was in talks with UConn about joining the league, and all sports sources confirmed to ESPN on Friday. No vote has occurred for a potential Huskies membership, nor is one close to happening, as sources cautioned that there has been pushback among several members that would need to be overcome. The talks have advanced to the point where UConn athletic director David Benedict and board chair Daniel Toscano met with the Big 12 athletic directors in person in Dallas last week to make their case. The conversation centered around football funding and how UCONN could be competitive upon joining the league in 2031, sources said. Part of UCONN's presentation covered how the Huskies would be prepared to build and spend money on football like the current Big 12 programs, according to sources. They also pitched the league on how quickly they became competitive in the Big East Football Conference, and I saw that firsthand as a West Virginia fan after joining in 2004. A Big 12 board call is planned for next week with the league's presidents that would lay out the specific deal points according to sources. All right, here's an interesting quote. It says, "I think the word is premature," a high-ranking Big 12 official said. "There's a far distance between conversations and anything that would happen. The presidents haven't seen the case yet," end quote. The addition would be for all sports, and the delay to 2031 in football would give UConn a chance to catch up in terms of funding and a talent upgrade through NIL. The Athletic first reported that potential board call and the talks. The other sports, including basketball, would be added whenever UConn could negotiate or wait out the 27-month waiting period to exit the league. There's a lot more to dive into, sources warned. The votes to add UConn have yet to be solidified. While some schools are in favor of adding the Huskies, multiple athletic directors within the league have been outspoken against it. Several others are undecided. The ultimate vote would come down to 12 of 16 of the league's presidents. Some of the pushback is due to the timing of the discussions, as league officials are busy dealing with the House versus NCAA settlement. There are also questions about how much the move would benefit the conference in football. Talks about how Mark's been bullish on basketball. That stuff, I don't want to rehash all that. Big 12 being one of the top basketball leagues. Yeah, Mark's been bullish on expansion, re-up the league's TV deal over the Pac-12. He also pushed to try to get Gonzaga. That did not come to fruition. So, yeah, looks like there's some pushback from some ADs inside the conference, and they're stressing that nothing is imminent. So, anyway, all these people are leaking stories to suit their narrative here. And not saying the narrative's wrong, but everybody's trying to get out ahead of this thing before it gets out of hand. To me, if there's smoke, there's fire. I think it's real. I think at the end of the day, Mark's going to be able to push us across the finish line. I just think he will. I think he'll push it across the finish line. Infamous front runner says Zags will probably replace UConn in the Big East. That's a good point. Appalachia Africa Twin says Mick Stevens, LOL. That's funny right there. He's talking about the Seattle market, I guess. John Christophic in the house. Yes, they are terrible in football. That's why they wouldn't bring them in until 2031. It gives them time to build up their program. ADs get zero say. I don't agree. I don't agree with that, King Baldwin. If the ADs don't agree with it, it never makes it to the president level. They already met with the ADs. Now they're meeting with the presidents. I think ADs, and I think most presidents will listen to their AD's opinion. It doesn't mean they'll always agree with it, but I think they'll listen. So I disagree with that statement, respectfully, of course. Big 12, a 17-team conference, yeah, in basketball and other sports, yes. Which makes me wonder, do they have to bring in an 18th team to make it an even number, or can they stay at 17? I don't know. I disagree, Mick. I guess a lot of that is because I'm over here in the East Coast, not the East Coast, but in the eastern part of the country in West Virginia. I don't want West Virginia. West Virginia does not need to be traveling their Olympic sports teams to freaking Washington. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't like it. And I'm sure UCF doesn't want to do it. I'm sure Cincinnati probably doesn't want to do it. And UConn may not want to do it. Louisville and UConn. I thought about that, Movie Time Blues. That's a great point. Great point. Brent Becker at WVU would have a big say. Absolutely, he would. His title was vice president and director of athletics. So he's more than just an AD. The line about how UConn could build and spend is important. Could be hinting that UConn builds an on-campus football stadium. I agree, and I think that's what their NIL collective is pushing for. That guy may carry a big stick. Who knows? I don't know who the guy is. I just found it interesting that was the tweet that popped up on my feed when I went to look for the Pete Thamel article. I just did, Stormy Cyclone. I just did. I read it. Sure did. There's some pushback among some ADs in the conference, and nothing's imminent. But talks are taking place, and there's going to be a call with the Big 12 presidents next week. Louisville and UConn would be – I would love to have Louisville, man. I'm telling you, Louisville is probably outside of Florida State and Clemson. Louisville might be my third choice because I don't think – we're not going to get Florida State and Clemson, folks. Unless they bring in private equity money, it's not happening, I don't think. But Louisville would be my next choice. Miami, obviously, too, but I don't think that's happening either. And then Virginia Tech. As a West Virginia fan, I'd probably rather have Virginia Tech than Miami just because of the rivalry and because they're right down the road from me. I can drive to their stadium in an hour. But that's for selfish reasons. As far as bringing value to the conference, I think Louisville brings more value to the conference than Virginia Tech or Pitt. Either one. Yep. I think I just answered that. I just don't think, to be honest, and I'm not saying this just because they're a rival either, but I don't think Pitt brings a lot to the table, man. They don't really bring a new market because you've already got West Virginia. I don't, they do bring academics. They would help the academic standing of the conference. That's accurate. Their fan base is not that. They bring a good brand, a good historic brand from a football perspective, and more recently in basketball, they've gotten better. I don't know. I'd love to have it would bring, you'd get more eyeballs for the backyard brawl. That's for sure. I wouldn't hate it, John, but they wouldn't be my first choice. Corey Belt says, locked on UConn. My source tells me Big 12 absolutely imminent, that they have the votes, and this is just the beginning. This is all but a done deal. And follows that up with, it doesn't get leaked like this if UConn is getting denied. ESPN will not pay FSU and Clemson $65 million when they can pay a split cost in the Big 12. Kelby Johns, I'd love Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State. Agreed. For those of you who might be watching on X, thank you, first of all. Second of all, I'd appreciate if you'd come and check out my YouTube channel once this is over with, which will be here shortly. Come check out all my past videos. I'm obviously a West Virginia fan, so I do a lot of West Virginia content. I have a video coming out tomorrow. I'm going to show you on paper with data why this West Virginia team that Penn State's getting ready to play on August 31st is better than the one they played last year. And so those Penn State fans who are way overconfident don't need to be. This West Virginia team is going to be better, and I think I can prove it. Again, obviously we're all predicting here, but I'm really confident that this West Virginia team is going to be much better than the one that went into Happy Valley a year ago. And I've got data to back it up. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. Nate says West Virginia already is going to have to travel some Olympic sports to the West Coast. I believe the talks to let Oregon State join as an affiliate member of Big 12 in some Olympic sports. I wouldn't be opposed to those kind of types of. I just don't want to bring them in football or basketball, really. To be honest, at least not yet, not now, not until I just don't think it makes sense to do it right now. Not with this whole thing going on with the ACC, which is one of the arguments I made against UConn. Wait and see what happens with the ACC first, then try to go get those teams. But maybe Brett Yormark sees the writing on the wall that the ACC's thing's not really going to happen, or is not going to happen as quickly as he wanted it to. And UConn's the next best option. Or maybe he thinks getting UConn, as I said earlier, is a defensive move to keep the ACC from adding them. Or maybe adding UConn gets some of the ACC teams to look at the Big 12 even closer. That's another option. Excuse me. Yep, Stormy, great point. Jormark's option, but convincing 12 of the 16 presidents it makes sense is his job now. See, another super chat from Appalachia Africa Twin. Thank you for your generosity. He says, smash the darn like button, peeps. 74 watching, only 10 likes. Get it up. Show your support for Couz. There's only 10 likes. All you got to do, guys, if you're watching live, is if you're watching on your mobile device, you can't see the like button. Hit the X, close out the live chat. It keeps the show going. Close out the live chat. Go just click that like button, that thumbs up button real quick. And then go down in the chat box and pull the live chat right back up. And let's keep rolling. And if you're watching this on the replay, by the way, you can also hit the like button, and that helps the algorithm. There are 52 likes. Thank you, King Baldwin. I'll bet Appalachia Africa Twin didn't reset, or his comment got 42 more people to hit the like button. Either way, I'll take it. Kevin says, Oregon State and Washington State would be great ads once the Big 12 adds some ACC teams. That I would be more on board with. I just don't want to see them do it right now. I have nothing against those two schools, and I don't want to see them left out to dry, but they've got to do what's best for the Big 12. Logan Martin, I don't want to get into the details of it. We actually are, we don't hate each other. There's no hatred or anything like that, no ill will towards one another. It just didn't work out as business partners, and we had a disagreement, and that's basically the gist of it. That's all I'm going to get into, but he and I have spoken. We are not on bad terms with one another or anything like that. It was just we were better apart than we were together. I mean, he got this Locked On deal now. I've been able to bring on some new sponsors. I've had other things pop up, potential opportunities come up. Some have worked out, some haven't. But point is, both of our shows are growing and doing well. I obviously stepped away from the basketball channel we had together just because I don't have time to do two channels. It just I got a full-time job, 3 kids. I don't have time to run 2 YouTube channels. And for him, it's a full-time job. So he had a little bit more time to do that. So I'll let him take it over. Logan says he respects and enjoys both shows. Thank you, Logan. Yeah, like I said, me and Paul we did have a disagreement. But again, it's not like, we're wishing each other ill will or, nothing like that. It's just, we're both professionals, and we're both, we do value the relationship we had in the past, and don't want, we'd hate to see it tarnished by hatred or how it goes, man. Sometimes people just can't work together. It's just life. We had different vision for how we wanted to do things, and it's all working. It's working out. I think it's working out for the better for both of us, to be honest with you. So it's all good. But it's a fair question. I knew somebody would bring it up at some point. All righty. Listen, I've been on here 18 minutes. This has been awesome. Between X and YouTube, I got 242 people watching. I really appreciate it. Kenny's in the house. What's up, Kenny? Thank you for hopping in, my man. You can go back and check out the replay if you didn't catch it. But yeah, shout out to Katz, Kenner, Stone Street, and Buckner for being the sponsor of the show. If you need an accident or injury attorney, they're the people you need to call at 304-999-HURT or go to yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Don't forget to go to WV Sports Now if you're a West Virginia fan. Sign up for the Holler with promo code Couz to get a 40% discount on a 1-year membership. And, of course, don't forget, I have a website myself. It's called Couz'sCorner.com. There are blog articles over there about West Virginia sports. Go check it out. I don't promote that enough, really, to be honest with you. Got a new show I've started called Golden Blue Breakdown with Jonathan Martin. We're up to 4 episodes now. We're doing 1 show a week all throughout football season. We've already done 4 shows, in preparation for the season, and we're going to do our Penn State preview show next week, so be ready on the lookout for that. And I've got Matt Thornsberry, who's going to be doing some contributing to the show as well, covering the Big 12 for me. Just got a lot of things brewing here on the channel. Very excited about it, and it's going to be a fun football season. I can't wait. Just a little over a week away from Mountaineers playing, and we're less than 24 hours away from the start of college football 2024. That should get you excited. It does me. I appreciate everybody tuning into this live show tonight. And make sure you take care of your family, take care of your health, take care of your friends and family. Have a top shelf day, and cue Country Roads.